So the primary objectives, or the main reason why a healthcare delivery system exists, are twofold. First and foremost is for it to make sure that all of the citizens or the residents of its country, that these people receive healthcare services whenever they are needed. And if you enable most, and better yet, all of those of the residents you have in your own country, then it results to universal access. We'll talk more a little bit about universal access in the following slides. The second most important objective of a healthcare delivery system is in terms of how you deliver this healthcare services. So that means this healthcare services should be cost effective. What does cost effective mean? Well, the best way to explain this is to give you an example. Let's say, for instance, any cancer screening, say a mammogram. So a mammogram does not come out cheap. It is a procedure. It requires professional training. You need a referral from a physician. You need a technician to run the machine. You need an expert, another physician to read the results. So it does cost something. However, mammograms are cost effective because what does it do? It's an early screening procedure for breast cancer. That means even if mammograms cost money, it is cost effective because it catches or even prevents cancer from progressing. So say a lump in the breast can be detected, or some abnormalities can be detected if they cannot be physically palpated, for instance. So it becomes cost effective because even though it has some cost attached to it, it could prevent an event which is a more serious scenario of a cancer situation from happening. And also, in terms of delivering healthcare services, the other way is it should be within pre-established standards of quality, meaning the country or the nation should have certain standards wherein the quality of care is given. For instance, if you're going to take care of diabetics, what are you supposed to do? So doctors follow this general standards of care. There are other ways to explain standards of quality. As a matter of fact, quality is one of the cornerstones of healthcare, and we will be talking more about this. One thing for sure is that the United States has a unique system of healthcare delivery. It's actually pluralistic. That's the best description we have for it. And it's quite different from the healthcare systems of other countries. And also, our healthcare system is very complex and very massive. It has several components to it, and it is quite big. So here are two terminologies that we need to explain before we proceed, and that is healthcare delivery and health services delivery. So if you're talking about healthcare policy, healthcare administration research, if we want to split hairs, they actually mean two different things. However, for the purposes of this course, because this is a foundations course, we are going to refer to these two terminologies in a very broad sense. So therefore, whenever you encounter these terminologies, for the purposes of this course, we are going to refer to them with this meaning. We could either refer to either of the two terminologies as the major components of the system, the processes that enable to receive healthcare in that system, and how the provision of healthcare services are given to patients. So I alluded to this in the first slide. So In contrast, aside from us, the United States, in contrast to our country, most developed countries have national health insurance programs, and they're also referred to as universal access. Universal access is simply defined as having the infrastructure to provide routine and basic health care. So the key word here is routine and basic health care. Provided to a country's citizens or residents, and it is, for the most part, if not all the time, run by the government, meaning the government is the central entity in the way the systems are run. And it is financed through taxes from the general population. Unfortunately, not all Americans are entitled to this type of healthcare services, routine and basic healthcare services. That's why there's a lot of people that do not have access to primary care, for instance. And like I said, because of the nature of our healthcare system, that makes us different from other developed countries. All right, here's another concept that we need to explain before we can proceed, because this concept, this economic concept, is quite important in explaining the cost of healthcare in terms of monetary value and in terms of a nation's economy. And I am talking about the gross domestic product, GDP. So GDP is the most encompassing measure of a nation's total economic activity. So it represents the value of that economy. So if you put a monetary value to the goods and services that happen or are produced within a country's geographic borders within 1 year, then if you put all that money or that monetary value together, that is referred to as the gross domestic product. So strictly defined, it's really the sum of the market values or the prices of all the final goods and services that were produced within an economy in any given year. Okay, let's take things in context here. Let's actually start off with this bullet point before we go up there. The United States gross domestic product is estimated at 20.5 trillion, not billion, not million, but trillion, $20.5 trillion. Okay? So just look at this amount, and then we said that all the services, if you put a monetary value to it, and expenditures, if you put a monetary value to it, and you put them together, is the GDP. So let's see how much we spend for healthcare. So don't forget this amount first. Now let's go back to the very first bullet point. The United States spends about 3.5 trillion US dollars, or about $10,224 per person. That's 3.5. Now 3.5 trillion is 17, close to 18% of this amount. That means almost 18% of our economy is spent on healthcare alone, and it costs about $10,000 per person. The US healthcare spending, and to put this in another perspective, just look at United Kingdom's gross domestic product. Their gross domestic product is $2.8 trillion. That means our spending on healthcare is even bigger than the economy of the United Kingdom. So just think of that for a second and let that sink in. Okay, so let's put this further in a deeper perspective. Let's look at this graph, and please pay attention carefully to the countries. that are in this graph. So this is a graph of healthcare spending as percent of GDP in 2017. By the way, these are all the available latest figures that is available right now. So I'm using figures for 2017. Obviously, this has gone up a little bit in the last 2 or 3 years. Let's look at Australia, United Kingdom, so on and so forth. These are all developed countries. And another common denominator in these countries is that they all provide universal access. Now look at their percentage of their gross domestic product in relation to their spending on healthcare. Australia spends about 9.3%, and they give universal healthcare to their citizens. We spend 18%, and we do not give universal access to our citizens. How about Canada? Canada spends 10.5% of their gross domestic product, and Canada provides universal access to its citizens. We, as a country, the United States, spends almost 18% of our gross domestic product. What do we have to show for it? Not much. And again, I want to point it out that despite of this huge percentage of our economy being spent on healthcare, we are not providing access to everyone, which means we do not have access. We do not provide universal access to healthcare to our citizens. So just look at this in perspective. Look at these countries. They are all rich countries. They are all developed countries. Next to us is Switzerland, but they are a far second in terms of the proportion of their economy being spent on healthcare alone. This graph here lists the same countries, okay? But this graph here shows how much each country spends per person in terms of healthcare. This sort of varies a little bit from the previous slides, but one thing is the same though. They spend way less than we do per person. So the lowest is United Kingdom. They spend about, they spend less than half of what we spend in healthcare per person. But even though we spend more than twice as they spend per person for healthcare, do we actually provide universal access to healthcare to our citizens? The answer is no. We all know that. Yet, why do we spend so much per person? And still, we're not able to provide healthcare, universal healthcare access to everyone in this country.